Chris, I'm grabbing water. I'll be right back. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Tabnine Office Hours. My name is Amanda Deshrook, and I'm head of marketing programs at Tabnine. Chris is on mute.
Oh, man, this seems to be a regular occurrence. It's 2 weeks in a row we're starting it off on mute. My name's Chris Good. I am a product marketer here at Tabnine, and yeah, as Maya said, excited to be here again for another awesome session of Tabnine Office Hours.
All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So you're all here. You know AI is here as well, and Gartner is forecasting its adoption is going to rise even more rapidly this year. So they're saying by 2028, 75% of enterprise software engineers will use AI code assistants, and that number is up from less than 10% in early 2023. And that's not really surprising, right? Because AI is fundamentally changing software development. And the productivity gains for using AI coding assistants for engineering teams have been incredible. And that's regardless of what tool you're using, whether it's an AI code assistant or an LLM, these solutions have value and are helping engineering teams deliver faster. And specifically at Tabnine, the increase that we've seen our customers come to expect ranges from a 30 to 50% increase in productivity gains across the full set of tasks that constitute the SDLC. So where have we been and where are we going from here? Well, AI capabilities are rapidly evolving, and Tabnine is continually stayed at the forefront of this emerging space. Starting all the way back in 2018, we were actually the entire inventor and creator of this category. That's when we released our first ever AI-based code completion model for Java IDE. We're also called Codota at that time. And from there in 2019, LLMs emerged for the first time. Of course, we were all probably not really aware of them yet because no one really paid attention to LLMs until ChatGPT exploded in popularity in the late 2022 or 2021. But with the emergence of LLM tech, we started to expand our code completions model to cover more languages across all major IDEs. And then the code completions got even better. In 2022, we got full function, full line, snippet, and block code completions. In 2023, we launched our AI chat agent, and that let you use natural language to do code generation through chat. In 2024, we launched our first iteration of our context engine, developing local IDE context and global context. And 2024 also saw us launch AI agents, human-in-the-loop AI agents for every single step of the SDLC. So that's what we've already built. We've built a full set of AI agents for every step of the SDLC, and these agents help you accelerate and simplify the entire software development process. That can help you plan, create, document, test, review, and maintain code. And today you can use these agents directly in your IDE, like an AI pair programmer, assisting you with each one of these steps. And we will show you demos of all of these agents in action later today. So where are we going as an industry here, right? Well, AI-enabled software development is going to be able to autonomously execute more and more tasks over time, unlocking more and more value for your business, theoretically. And Tabnine is really your perfect partner along that journey. Now, you may have seen a video interview of Mark Zuckerberg on the Joe Rogan podcast, whether you love Joe Rogan or hate him. But Zuck said that the AI engineer is already here in 2025. Now, I don't believe that's true for the enterprise. We don't believe that's true for the enterprise. And literally any enterprise engineering leader I speak to also doesn't believe that's true for the enterprise. So I'm not entirely sure what Zuck was talking about there. But where we do agree with them is that this technology has potential and it will continue to improve and evolve, and it will eventually deliver some form of what many of us in our industry are calling an AI engineer, and what you imagine is one. But this isn't happening tomorrow. It's not happening this year, and forecasts on when it will happen range from as near as 5 years away to multiple decades. So the truth is, if anyone actually tells you they can accurately predict when something like a fully autonomous AI engineer will emerge, that's a statement you should take with a grain of salt. So we grounded ourselves by looking at what's actually happened. So let's take a look at where we actually are. And where we are today is transitioning from AI coding assistants to semi-autonomous human-in-the-loop AI agents for specific tasks and capabilities in the SDLC for mature enterprise engineering teams. Now, before you even get to a true agentic AI for software development that mature enterprise engineering teams can actually trust and use, there's some things that need to happen. Agentic AI needs to use deep organizational insights. And the reason for that is, in an analysis by a number of independent researchers, GetClear is a great example of a study that came out. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll share that information later this week specifically. But in an analysis by independent researchers, it was observed that in some cases in teams, as the adoption of AI-generated code rose, so did the number of rejected pull requests. And in some cases, that meant there was a massive amount of rejection at code review. But why would that be the case? AI clearly knows how to code, and it knows the programming languages. And really, the answer lies in your organization itself. So if I ask the 67 of you that are live on air right now, the right answer to a specific engineering assignment, it's likely you'll give me at least 67 different answers. Now, the problem is that they're actually all correct. The only one that matches your expectations, the only one that's going to make it past your pull request and code review is the one that you've given. Now, working with an LLM, it's like hiring a software engineer off the street. They know the O'Reilly textbook answer to every single coding problem, but they don't know how your organization does things. So at best, they may propose to write a new function where an existing function already exists, increasing tech debt. At worst, they could propose changes that break your corporate policies or adversely affect your application. So when you combine the inherent knowledge and capabilities within an LLM with the right understanding of your team, you fix this problem. And that's really all about layering in the right level of context, which I'll show you later. So to get from a AI chat assistant, AI code assistant, to a autonomous AI engineer, and along the way, agentic AI that you can trust, there's two things that we need to deliver on as an industry. First is agentic AI for the enterprise needs a comprehensive understanding of company knowledge and standards. And the second is that engineers need to have absolute control on a task level over the AI's scope, behaviors, and decision as it works. So it's a hell of a time to be an engineer, exciting even, but it's also challenging for engineering teams, specifically in the enterprise and highly regulated and privacy-conscious industries, because many of you have a mandate to adopt AI to increase efficiency, but you also have to adhere to your internal security policies, you have legal to contend with, and with all of that, you need to balance, you need to find a tool that actually works well, while the landscape keeps changing around your feet, and frankly, AI solution providers keep claiming they all do the same thing. But the proof is in the pudding, as you'll find with Tabnine when you actually do a trial or a POV with us. You'll see we're likely one of the few that'll actually tell you what the capabilities really are and can actually deliver on them. But I digress. So what I'd like to offer you with is some perspective. So as you undertake this journey evaluating AI and deploying AI agents at your enterprise, we're really going to be your partner along the way. So bear with me a little bit longer. I've got another maybe 15 minutes of slides to get through. We'll get to the demo that you all came here for. But I'll help you address all the challenges that you're facing along your path to enterprise AI adoption and give you a customized path that you can follow for compliant AI adoption at your company. So we all know now what the issue is with LLMs and generic AI code assistants and generic agentic AI software development. And the real issue is that they lack context. They give you generic answers. They generate more code and more tech debt. And using any of them today requires you to trade off between privacy, protection, and performance. Now, we don't believe you need to make that decision. With Tabnine, we eliminate the need to trade off between privacy, performance, and protection. With Tabnine, you can get it all. And the way we deliver on that is using powerful LLMs, layering on our advanced context engine for personalization, and combining that with AI agents that are fully human in the loop, giving you control over all their behavior, actions, and keeping your engineers in the pilot seat. These are not co-pilots, they're your agents. So let me show you this. This is the enterprise AI performance curve. So think about this line here as increased performance for your AI. And as you get to the pinnacle of performance, which is achieved by model fine-tuning of small language models, important here, you ideally want to do fine-tuning on small language models because you want control and you want clarity into the model's performance. And also a small language model is easier to control and fine-tune, but we'll talk about that later. Now, as the specificity of the AI output increases and you need highly fine-tuned control over its behavior, what happens is the amount of proprietary IP and sensitive information that the AI needs to ingest through its context engine increases. So starting all the way at the bottom here, you've got in IDE retrieval augmented generation, which is our first level of context awareness, local IDE context. That looks at about 15 different data points. From there, you've got non-code retrieval augmented generation. That's looking at things like Jira issues and our Confluence integration. Confluence coming soon, Jira is already out there. From there, you've got source code retrieval augmented generation. That's where you connect AI into your source code management systems. Tabnine supports Bitbucket, GitLab, GitHub, any Git-based repo, and any flavor of the 3 providers that I've shared with you today. You also can connect an unlimited amount of source code management systems and repositories to Tabnine. There are no limits there. Then finally, at the pinnacle here, this is what this chart calls code standards and security RAG, but really what it is constraints, it's guidelines, and it's rules for the AI to follow. Now, given that mature enterprise engineering teams need highly specific AI performance and they need to give it access to highly confidential information, what you see happening is that as the performance need increases from the AI, your privacy need increases as well. So what Tabnine really gives you is a customized AI software development platform that's fully configurable. So you can use any LLM you like, any set of LLMs you like. That includes third-party providers, ones that you've deployed on-prem in your own infrastructure, or perhaps LLMs that you're developing and fine-tuning yourself. We can plug in and support all of them and enhance them with our agentic AI and our personalization through our context engine. We also offer small language model fine-tuning of our Tabnine universal code completions model. This is a fantastic approach for things like semiconductor manufacturing, where you have engineers writing code in System Verilog and VHDL. It's a fantastic approach for aerospace and defense, where you have folks writing things in COBOL and other low-level machine languages. And it is a fantastic approach for government as well, which is all use cases where we are currently deployed and in use by thousands of engineers. But what we can do for you is give you a small language model that's fine-tuned on your code that gives you a excellent code completion for the most secure and precise engineering teams in your organization. Now, you may not need all of your engineers to be deployed on-prem air-gapped. And that's where that flexibility really becomes important, because you can also deploy Tabnine VPC at the same company. And for the teams where the security of your code is even less important, you can deploy Tabnine via SaaS. But of course, as I'll show you with you later, even if you deploy us via SaaS, it's fully private and your data is fully protected. So let's talk about addressing barriers to enterprise AI adoption. The first one is protecting your organization from the risk of copyright infringement. Now, historically, the IP liability present in LLM training data has been akin to Schrodinger's cat. It both is and isn't alive, or in that sense, the IP liability both is and isn't present. And organizations using AI already haven't been able to look inside the box, but whether you want to or not, it's time to look inside, and we did, and the cat is mostly free of IP liabilities. So this is an important thing to note and share with your legal team, because Nearly 90% of survey respondents to the 2025 RBC CIO survey, reported they're adopting AI into their processes by the end of 2025. And their biggest concern for nearly 38% of respondents was copyright infringement. So we wanted to share our expertise with you in this area. We've worked with a lot of organizations that share this concern. We've helped engineering teams navigate highly restrictive AI policies, and we can even provide teams that have legal policies banning the use of LLMs outright with a compliant pathway to adoption. But here's the important figure for you to ground yourself on. In this study by Carnegie Mellon University from last year, they looked at all of the most popular LLM models and studied the frequency of their generation of code snippets that had a striking similarity score on a benchmark they created called LICO-eval to license protected code. And what they found was the frequency of that occurring was between 0.88 to 2.01%. So what this data can tell you is that if you're using a third-party model from a reputable provider, the risk of IP liability is quite low. However, you don't need to just rely and bet the farm on that, because Tabnine offers the most comprehensive approach to copyright and IP compliance in the category. We do this in 3 ways. The first is provenance and attribution, which is what this GIF is showing you in action right now. It's a capability in Tabnine where we check AI-generated code from any LLM you're using against publicly visible code and flag matches and reference the source and the license for the code. So that makes it really easy to decide if the code meets your specific policies. What's coming really soon here is you're going to be able to take that decision out of the hands of the individual developer and set that through the admin console as organizational governance for your AI policies. So you'll be able to determine the license types that you find compliant and the ones that you don't, and suppress the ones that you don't from ever entering your code through AI. Now, if that's not good enough for you, we also offer a completely IP-safe LLM for our most sensitive customers, and that's called Tabnine Protected. And Tabnine Protected is purpose-built for software development, of course, but what the important thing about it is that it's trained exclusively on permissively licensed code. And this meets the requirements of teams with the highest standards for IP compliance, which is really common in some software companies or sensitive industries. What's also unique about Tabnine Protected is that we're the only LLM provider on the market that exposes the full set of underlying training data. You can access that through the Tabnine Trust Center. We're happy to share it with you and for you to review that. Now, of course, capping it all off, we offer contractual protection through indemnification to our enterprise customers. So really, there's no need to worry. Now, the second thing you need to do is personalize the output of AI generation to fit your organization's context. And this is really critical because can generic assistants generate code for enterprise-grade challenges? This study from George Mason University took a look at that. And what they found is that generic AI code assistants such as Copilot and Codium really struggled with hard challenges. So they found usability issues in aligning Copilot's code with real-world tasks. They noted inefficiencies with it in complex environments like the ones you run into and operate in every day. And specifically, Codium struggled significantly with hard problems across all categories, with an overall success rate as low as 13% for hard problems. So this is how we solve that for you today. This is our advanced context engine. Now note this is a architecture slide, so not all of these capabilities are out yet today, but this is what we have on our roadmap. Now, what we already have built for you today is you can use Tabnine in all of the major IDEs. We have generation agents for every step of the SDLC. We've released code validation agents for code review that check for security. Of course, we've got provenance and attribution for compliance. Our code review agent also checks for performance, architecture, maintainability. And then, of course, we've got our bug fixing agent as well. Now, this also lets you combine the Tabnine Enterprise Context Engine with proprietary and customized models that we develop for you, or the ones that you develop yourself, as well as any third-party model you like. And we have a growing list of integrations for context with other model providers and other parts of your enterprise tech stack. And of course, on a pull request side of the house, we currently integrate with GitHub PRs and additional PRs coming soon, but naturally you can connect Tabnine to any source code management system. So before I share a bit more about our context engine, let me ground you on how LLMs really work today. And because I can't talk to you live on air right now, you'll have to forgive me if this is stuff you already know. But modern day LLMs are transformer-based models, so they reason about sequences. And really what they know is the relationship that exists between entities within the sequence, and that enables them to predict what comes next in that sequence. So here you have a kind of silly but fun example of how neural networks arrive at an output. Humpty Dumpty sat on a what? Okay, Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, 98% probability. So coding assistants that use LLMs have LLMs that have been trained on a huge corpus of open source software. And we're talking billions of repos here comprising hundreds and hundreds of different languages. And in a lot of cases, coding assistants can solve problems purely through the data set on which the LLM has been trained. And you'll find that this is common when you're going from 0 to 1, starting from scratch. But that's usually not the case for enterprise engineering teams. You're more like going from 101 to 102. So why do we use retrieval augmented generation? Well, RAG basically gives you the output and intended effect of fine tuning without having to perform fine tuning. And it solves one of the criticisms of LLMs, even fine-tuned LLMs, when it comes to coding, in that the output that these LLMs produce is out to date. And this is how it works with a stick figure diagram. I'm not much of an artist, so you'll have to forgive me for that as well. But when you make a query into Tabnine, like this guy here is asking, how do I build a REST client to call the Acme services layer? Now, instead of that going straight to the LLM and it spitting out a generic response, what happens first is that query gets sent into our retrieval system. It goes into ranked documents that we've created through indexing. And then the query is rewritten and enhanced prior to being sent to the LLM before generating a response. Now, there's two ways that we do retrieval augmented generation here. There's semantic memory, and that basically uses a semantic understanding of the code base to retrieve semantically relevant entities into the inference context. And this is language specific. So we use language servers here to analyze the project and to create an in-memory representation of semantic information. The second way we do it is with vector memory. So in this case, we create documents that are retrieved from code sources and non-code sources. Text is then chunked into model digestible pieces. We create numerical embeddings for each chunk and load those into the vector store. And that vector space is updated periodically to reflect changes in your code. Now, if you were trying to do this through fine tuning, you would constantly have to run your fine tuning process on a hourly or by the minute basis. Which if you've ever tried to do model fine tuning before, you know that that's actually impossible to do that quickly. And what this lets you do is expose best practices and make code discoverable and encourage code reuse, as well as control the output of the LLM so that it fits your organizational context. And here's an example exactly of how that occurs. So you're using a question or prompt in the IDE plugin, standalone questions hitting similarity and semantic search, then it's going to vector DB. It's getting our retrieval documents, pushing all that information that's contextually enhanced into the LLM, and boom, you've got a relevant code suggestion. So starting from our first level of context awareness, local code awareness, this is all the data points that we look at. There's about 15 of them. So current file, open files, current selection, imported libraries, compiler syntax errors, terminal, other project files, project metadata, Git history, conversation history, connected repositories, and other sources of information. So this is how we increase the quality of AI code recommendations through personalization. 4 levels of context: local context awareness, connection to your code and knowledge bases, coaching based on your standards, and customization of the underlying models as needed. So here's a quick look at deeper dive in personalization. There is our local context. Here is our code-based context, which is giving you AI tailored to you and your team without sacrificing privacy. And the bullets on this slide are specifically relevant to using Tabnine via our SaaS deployment. Naturally, if you're doing VPC or on-prem or air-gap deployments, it's fully self-contained. And of course, when you get into coaching, you get explicit guidance to control how Tabnine behaves. And that operates in the pull request as well as in the IDE. So Tabnine generates code that complies with all of your standards. And then finally, of course, fine-tuning the model for ultimate personalization. So let's talk about coaching and why that's important, because any AI code assistant, even a generic one, and any LLM can generate code, but only Tabnine can validate that code. And that's important because code generated by generic assistants is questionable in its security. So this study looked at GitHub projects and Copilot generated code. It also examined GPT and Codium. They found that on average, 30% of code snippets generated by these tools have security weaknesses. The security weaknesses were diverse, and they related to 43 different CWEs, and 8 of the CWEs found belong to the currently recognized 2023 CWE Top 25. So that is a problem because you can't scale code generation if you're scaling security weaknesses, technical errors, and bugs. So this is how we solve that for you. So we've developed our Tabnine code review agent. And what you can do with the code review agent is you can codify your institutional knowledge. For example, accepted standards for software development, architectural best practices, maintainability rules, security rules, so on and so forth. And you can create policies and guardrails that guide the performance and output of generative AI. There's 2 ways to train this. There is a simple way, which is inputting your rules via natural language into the admin UI for the rule set. And then there's the way that we can help you develop it as well, which is we point Tabnine at your existing pull requests, extract the most common occurrences of rules that need to be implemented, and generate a rule set for you. You can also point Tabnine at a golden repository that you tell us about that contains your organization's best code and extract your rule sets from there. But once you've done that, you've got a code review agent that's completely customized and fine-tuned to you. And it checks and reads your code in the pull request directly and is also shifting left into the IDE over time. So Tabnine will just generate code that matches your standards from the get-go, even prior to the pull request. Now, you also need to think about future-proofing your AI software development platform, and we give you complete control over your AI infrastructure to do that. This is really important because many of our customers are developing their own LLMs, and as we've all seen with the rise of Llama, Quen, and DeepSeek, the LLM arms race is far from over, and you're going to want flexibility. So with Tabnine, you get that. So you have complete model flexibility to choose the best fit for you. Of course, with our SaaS offering, we offer a ton of different models that you can use. If you're deploying via VPC, you can connect into your private endpoints for those models as well. For example, you can do Claude Sonnet through AWS Bedrock. And then, of course, if you're deployed on-prem and you've got your own models in your infrastructure, you can connect those into Tabnine as well. And that lets you create a fully self-contained AI system. So total privacy, flexibility, and control is in the play here. So you can deploy however you like. Of course, you can deploy as via SaaS. You can deploy as VPC. You can deploy as on-premises. And you can also deploy Tabnine fully air-gapped. And what's super cool about Tabnine is within your single company, you can have multiple deployment types of Tabnine. So that really gives you total control over your data privacy and performance. So now you have a good understanding of what's happening in the category. The way Tabnine's capabilities are putting you in the best position possible to leverage these innovations for today and for years to come. So let's cap all this together and then hand it off to Chris for the demo. So Tabnine is delivering an AI software development platform that's tailored to you. And when I say tailored to you, I mean tailored to the specific needs of highly mature enterprise engineering teams. You've seen how it's personalized. You've seen how we keep your data private. You've seen how we protect you from the drawbacks and limitations created by generic assistants. But it's not just us tooting our own horn. We've been recognized by leading analyst firms. Most recently, Gartner recognized us in their critical capabilities report for AI code assistants in 2024. Looking at all 12 major providers in the space, we ranked first for 3 use cases, and we ranked a very, very close second for the other 2 of the 5 use cases. And we were also top ranked by Everest Group as well as OMDIA. So let's go ahead and take a look at what you can do with Tabnine. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Chris. And before we do that, I'm just going to check the chat and make sure that there aren't any questions that have come in that we have not answered yet. Full reminder, this is an interactive session, so please feel free to ask us any questions along the way. As Chris starts his demo, we will pause answering questions until he completes the demo. But as soon as that demo is completed, we will get back to answering all your questions. And we also even will show you demos on request in this live stream. These sessions are fully live. Excellent. Bob, we now have the ability to attach images to our prompts in Tabnine. Can you talk about what the AI models can do with them? Can it convert designs into code? How effective is it? What are some other good use cases for image use? Yeah, great question, Bob. So this is a new capability in Tabnine called context control or context panes. And what that lets you do is it puts the control for fine tuning through RAG, the output of any LLM directly in the hands of the individual developer. So that's really letting you get task-specific control over our retrieval augmented generation from the various context sources I shared with you earlier. That includes image context, local ID context, code base, repository, so on and so forth. And there's some pretty cool things you can do with image context. And we're about to do a Tabnine live in a couple of weeks, diving deep into image context, showing you the 6 top use cases that we've identified for doing so. So great question there, Bob. Let's see, anything else from anyone? We'll wait for 10 seconds here for any questions that are hopping in before we hop into the demo. All righty, there we go. All right, Chris, gonna hand it off to you. Let's get right into the demo here.
Cool. All righty. So let us start at the top. Let's start going over at a high level interacting with Tabnine, right? So we're going to start with the UI that folks will be interacting with and each of the agents that you're going to find along the way. So let me remove this little notification. Okay. So I'm currently in VS Code. When you open your IDE, you'll see Tabnine here on the left-hand side. Now, again, it's worth mentioning we do support the entire JetBrains family, VS Studio, of course, VS Code, Eclipse, and Vim, NeoVim. So when you click this Tabnine icon, right, you're going to populate this Tabnine AI chat. Now, there's a lot going on here, so we're going to start here at the bottom. So down here, you can use everyday conversational natural language to type in prompts and queries. As I may have just talked about, this is also our context pane, right, where you can add and remove, determine really your scope, right? So for the sake of this, we're going to use current file, we're going to use local ID workspace, and we're also going to use remote code-based repositories as well. So I do have some of these connected. Now, below that, you'll see the ability for @mentions, this \, which will initialize your quick commands. So these top ones you'll probably recognize. These are local on your machine. Now these ones, though, are ones that I've specifically created, and we'll get into how exactly I did that later on in the demo. Next to that, you'll find our images context, right? So as we just talked about, the ability to add, let's say, architectural diagrams, UX, UI changes, things of the sorts. We're going to talk a lot about that in a couple of weeks, as Amaya said, but a lot of really cool stuff you can do here. And then this Jira button is where you can launch your Jira integration agent, right? So, or implementation agent. This is going to show your most recent within 30-day window Jira tickets attached to you or your account that you've integrated with. So next to that, though, at the top here, we're going to see our switchable models drop down. So when you click that, it's going to populate this drop down. Now, these are going to be the models that are available to me, determined by my administrator. For the sake of this demo, and pretty much always, I'm just going to stay on Claude 3.5 Sonnet because I love it and it seems to work really, really well. We know it works well, actually. We have the data to back that up. So next to that, you're going to see our test agent. Now, this is really powerful, and we're going to get into this later on in the demo, but this is where you can generate comprehensive test plans for your code, or you can import current test plans and check for complete test coverage. And we'll talk about that flow and how you can iterate to get as close as you can to complete test coverage as possible, which is seemingly quite difficult. Next to the test agent, we have our settings icon. Now, this is, again, settings historically, maybe for other apps, have been boring, right? Settings with Tabnine is where you can set a lot of really cool personalization capabilities, right? Starting at the top, we have the Jira integration. 2 clicks, 30 seconds. If you've ever integrated anything before with the SaaS app, it's incredibly easy. It'll populate a new window, and then you just integrate it, and you're good to go there. Below that, you'll find response length, custom behaviors, and custom commands. And each of these allow you to personalize your experience as an individual developer exactly how you prefer to work, right? As Amaya said earlier, it's really about fine-tuning to each unique developer at each unique organization, right? And this is part of how we achieve that. And then this is also where you can toggle inline chat completions, right? So as you're typing within the Tabnine AI chat, it'll recognize your intent and offer suggestions or auto completions. So this is the Tabnine chat. Let's go into the file and in the lines of code, and we'll talk about what we see there. So let's see if we, okay, perfect. So at the top of each code block, you're going to find the Tabnine code lens, right? So this is where you can access these built-in quick commands, right? Our agents, right? Like edit, test, explain, and document. And it's going to be specific to this block of code, right? So very similar to the same agents you've seen here in the dropdown, just slightly more in line with your file and your developer flow. As you type as well, you'll notice that there are auto completions, right? So tab 9 here is going to recognize my intent. If I'm, in this case, creating more recent alerts, it's going to recognize that and say, okay, you don't have a multiple failed attempts. Let's provide that auto suggestion. Anything in gray here is going to be tab 9's auto completions. Not to be confused with the drop down here is not tab 9. Gray is tab 9, right? So whether it's tests, I'm adding more alerts, I'm writing documentation, tab 9 is going to be able to recognize that and be able to provide relevant auto completions or code completions or suggest them at least to help me complete my job just a little bit faster. Now, the last piece here we're going to talk about as far as interacting with tab 9 is this quick command palette, right? So our inline actions. Now, it's initialized on a Mac by doing Command I, but understand that for those of you folks who use the JetBrains family, that might be a bit of an issue, right, as far as other key mappings go. So do not worry. You can remap keys on JetBrains. You have nothing to worry about there. Doing Command I populates this dropdown where you can, starting at the top, use natural language to just type in instructions. And that can alter the code or perform an action here on this block of code. You can use the quick commands, right, to do things like fix, document, explain, and explore. And then you can also determine your scope as well as select the specific model for this task at hand. Excuse me. So let's start going through the SDLC. We're going to go through a usual cycle for a software developer, and we're going to start with the planning phase, right? So at this first stage, it's incredibly important as a developer to gain an understanding of the project, what the application does, etc. So what we're going to be using is the tab 9 Code Explore agent. So let's, again, we'll do this drop down. That's where you can access them. We'll hit Code Explore. Now, what this is going to do, the tab 9 Code Explore agent is a built-in quick action within tab 9 chat that users can invoke when starting a conversation or at at an empty state or by using /code explore in the tab 9 chat prompt. The tab 9 chat will then return a high-level summary of the project's key elements, including runnable scripts, key dependencies, and overall structure. And in addition to that, it's also going to provide some follow-up questions, right? Allowing developers who are working on this project to dive a little bit deeper on their relevant task, right? It's also going to save experienced devs a lot of time having to onboard new teammates or into projects they haven't worked on in a while or new projects in general, This is really going to allow developers, to be much more independent and much more self-serving, which I think is everyone's goal, right? That's the dream. So you'll also notice that Tabnine doesn't just provide code suggestions. It's also going to provide terminal commands, right? So it's going to say, okay, to run this development server and to get up and running, you need to run these 3 or 4 things here, right? And that's incredibly helpful, right? Because we're actually understanding how to get it up and running, not just explaining us what the actual project just is. So we have an idea. Let's actually just dive a little bit. What is the role of Prisma within this contents of the project? Sweet. So like I said, it's going to just continue to dive deeper. In this case, let's say I'm curious about what we're doing with Prisma and how it ties back into this project. It's going to provide me a comprehensive overview here and then explain how to actually work with it within this project. Awesome. Okay. So we have an idea now what this project is, right? It is a fraud detection dashboard. We know it's a React or TypeScript application. For everyone who's possibly curious about what it looks like, we can see it here, and it's all its glory with the lime green and coral. Ugh, it's a heck of a color scheme. Okay, so let's go back over. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to start a new conversation, and you'll recognize that every time I have a new goal, query, something I'm trying to achieve, new task, I'm going to start a new conversation. Just best practices, and we'll go through more of those later on at the end as sort of a way to cap off this demo. But now that we know what's in this application, let's go on to the next phase of the SDLC, which is going to be to create something, right? So we're going to start a new conversation here. Now we talked earlier about our Jira agent, right? We have this implementation agent. So we've already connected Tabnine to Jira. However, it just takes a few clicks if you haven't done that yet. To be quite frank, 2 or 3. So what we're going to do here, let's go over to our Jira board. Now, you can see in this demo board here, 58 to-dos. It's a lot of tickets. 7 ready for dev, 2 in progress, 2 in evaluation. Now, specific to me, there's just 14. Now, when I'm connected into Jira within my Tabnine instance, and I click this Jira button or I type in @Jira:, you're going to see here this drop down. Now, I'm only seeing 11 out of 14 issues, and that's expected. Why? Because Tabnine's only going to pull in the most recent, or the only tickets that Tabnine will ingest or pull in and show here within the dropdown are ones that have been active within the last 30 days, right? And it's only going to show ones that are specific to your user profile, right? So you're not going to have to worry about seeing your whole team's tickets and having to go through and go to those dropdown and say, okay, which ones are mine? Which ones are Amea's? They're only going to show the ones that are specific and assigned to you, which is really helpful. No more going back and forth into Jira and reading the description and acceptance criteria and trying to map out, am I doing this right? And having to check. You can do it all from here without ever having to leave your IDE, which is very powerful. So let's start off with doing a redesign here. Let's just go back and see. We're going to implement a new ticket here, and I'm just curious. Okay, this is mint green and coral. We do not want that one. All right, we're going to do that brand redesign. Okay, so let's go in here. We're going to do brand redesign 1. And we're just going to hit enter. You could say, please implement this, or can you implement this? Or you can just enter the ticket, and it'll provide the code, right? So here's the modifications that we're going to need to make. In this case, we're going to specifically need to change the sidebar to mint green and the top bar to coral. So what we'll do is we'll see this apply button here with our code suggestions. This is really powerful. And seemingly by the size, it looks small, but do not be mistaken. This is a mighty feature. And why is that? Well, a lot of other generic AI code assistants, when you have a suggestion and you go to insert it, you have to track it down. You have to have your cursor in the right area. And then you actually have to go and make sure when it's inserted, it goes exactly there. I don't know about you, but it sounds like a lot of extra work to me. The apply button special, regardless of your cursor location, regardless of your open file. When you click apply here, Tabnine will automatically insert that code where it should be, regardless of cursor location or regardless of file open, right? Which is incredibly powerful. It's also going to show you the diff, right? So it'll say, okay, this is what's been changed. This is what we've added. And now we can go back and validate. Whoops. Need to click this. We'll say validate this ticket. Sweet. So it'll give you the acceptance criteria, and then it's going to go through and give you a summary. And it's going to say, okay, 1 and 2 have been fully met. 3 appears to be addressed, but requires further validation or verification. And 4 and 5 cannot be fully verified. And that's powerful. It's not just blindly telling you what it thinks you want to hear, which is, yeah, looks good to go. You need to go and have nothing to worry about. Tabnine's smart enough to recognize that, okay, it's done what you've asked, but within your acceptance criteria, there's stuff that needs to be confirmed. Maybe it needs to be tested on multiple browsers, which is something that I know this does, right? That's not something that Tabnine can inherently do right now. So it's going to say, hey, I think you need to go do more work and just do that extra level of validation, which is what we want, right? That's awesome. So let's go over to let's see here. We're going to go over to the testing component next. And now we're going to jump projects as well. So now we're going to be over here in a Java project, and this is a password generator. So what we're going to do is, we talked about this earlier. We have this really powerful testing agent, right? And there's sort of 2 ways you can go about testing in Tabnine, and a handful of ways to actually achieve tests, right? You'll notice there's a testing button here within the code lens. You can test from the drop downs, by just typing in natural language query here. You can also use a quick command, right, to generate tests for code. And then you can use this test agent, which I think speaks levels about Tabnine's flexibility and freedom that we give to each developer, right? Now, I'll just going to talk about this for a quick second here. Something really powerful that I think that you don't get with a lot of other AI-driven software development platforms or AI code assistants is that they want you to do things their way, right? You might have to adopt their IDE, their own IDE, which we know is impossible to do at a large-scale enterprise. Convince all of your developers to adopt a new IDE. You might have to oh geez, well, that was a brain fart. Anywho, let's just continue. We'll continue going on here. So we're going to start generating a comprehensive test plan here. So what we're going to start doing is going to prompt us to select the code. Oh, geez, now I remembered. Freedom. We're not going to change the way that you like to work, right? Tabnine has the freedom and flexibility to let developers test how they want to test, generate documentation the way that you want to generate documentation. Whether you want to go in the IDE and have, or in the chat and have out of file experience, or you want to stay within the file and just use key bindings and quick commands and never take your fingers off the keyboard. We allow both of those scenarios and everything in between, right? So again, just want to hone in on freedom and flexibility from an individual developer's perspective. It's huge. So let's continue. We're going to select this code that we want to test. Let's do this generator.java file. Now, if we did have a test file, we could select it from here, and we'll go through that one second. But for the sake of this first part of the demo, we don't. So let's create another, testing area. Sweet. Now, what Tabnine's going to do is the testing agent is going to generate a comprehensive test plan. It's going to generate detailed test cases for functions, methods, and everything in between, right? And it will automatically generate test cases covering a wide variety of testing scenarios that we can see from the short description in plain English here. Now, let's add a few of these in there, right? So should generate a password with a specific length when all character types are included. Let's apply that because we like that one. Let's see here. Calculate and display the strength of a given password. Let's add that one as well. And then we're going to do one more. Now, let's say that you like to test, but you didn't love it. These are just suggestions, right? This isn't something that is the end all be all. You can always make modifications and you can change these. This is just a starting point. Let's say that you want to change this. We can right here with natural language or everyday language like you're used to typing, change the test output to remove the arrow and use a plus sign instead. Whoops. Now what it's going to do is it's going to go back, regenerate that test, but it's going to modify it and modify it how I want it to be modified. Boom, removing that arrow and adding in the plus sign. And then it's as simple as just applying and putting it in there. Now, let's go back and say that, we don't have a test file, or we do have a test file now, right? So let's go to our generator.java. We're going to open up our test agent again. We're going to do a new test plan, generate. Now we already have this code selected. Now we already have a test file this time around. So we're going to go find that generator.test. Oh, geez. Yep, this guy. Perfect. Continue. Now you'll notice something different. It's going to continue to generate a test plan for us. And it's going to provide a lot of those test cases. But now it's also going to recognize that, oh, you have some existing tests in there. we have three, right? Generate password with all character types, check password strength calculation, and generate multiple passwords in a session. It's also then going to recognize, okay, well, we want to have full coverage. Here are some other ones that you didn't see prior, right? Because it's continuing to work towards that goal of we want full coverage. So we can continue to add more, right? We're going to say, okay, I like this one. Display that all 18 password security tips. It's a lot of security tips, but we like to run a pretty tight shop over here. No lousy passwords, and we'll apply those there. Now, it's also going to show some attribution. Now, somewhere within here, it's going to say, okay, there is some code that seems to have a resemblance to something that is publicly available. In this case, this is where it's coming from, and this is the license that's attached to it. And then as a developer, I'm able to make that choice based on my organization's best practices, guidelines, standards. Do I want to use this? And now I know the risk associated with putting this code within my project. Very powerful, very cool. Now, the second piece here, within this file that we're going to talk about is fixing, right? So you can use Tabnine, the AI chat, to say, what are all of the errors in my generator test.java? Oh yeah, there are several issues. And then what you can do here with Tabnine is just go through one by one and click apply and implement each of these issues. And it'll say, here's a corrected version. So it's going to explain each issue to me, and then it's going to provide that corrected version. And all I do is click apply. Boom. Everything's in there. There we go. And we're all good to go. Seemingly, it seemed to be a different test file here, but concept still applies. I asked a question for a different file, but you can still see there were a lot of errors in there, and seemingly that import statement has taken care of a lot of them. Still have to go back and understand and deep dive, right? Why might some of these still be here? But that's all something I can have that two-way conversation with Tabnine. And that's something that I think we're going to see change a little bit. Conversation style, right? I think inherently we've been having one-way conversations with AI code assistants in general, right? LLMs in general. We tell them what we want to do, right? Do this, do that. I encourage everyone, though, especially when working with Tabnine, knowing the context that it has, have two-way conversations with it. Ask Tabnine, what's up with this code? What can I do to change it? How can I improve it? And we'll talk about that here in a second. But encourage everyone to have two-way conversations, because I think that's where you can have some serious magic. So let's go back over here into our fraud detection dashboard. And let's talk about documentation. That's seemingly the next step of this SDLC, right? We've created functionality. We've fixed broken functionality. We've explored our projects and we've tested. Now let's create some documentation using our documentation agent. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to select this code here. And what you can do with Tabnine is say, generate documentation for this block of code. Awesome. Now, this is one way to do it, right? So we can hit accept and good to go. We have some documentation in there. Now, let's say that we wanted to use the code lens, right? Or the quick commands drop down. We can say document code from here. And it's going to process this request and generate documentation for it. Now we can do something different though. We can refine this request. So let's say we like it, but we don't love it. We can say change the documentation to be to the right of each line rather than a block above. Doesn't matter why, right? In my case, I'm weird. I like it to the right of each line, but the important part is that you can alter it, right? So it's not just going to be generated at the top now. I want to refine that and I want to have it to each side. And then I hit accept. That'll push this there, and then we're good to go. We're going to remove that for the sake of keeping this project clean. And okay, so this is documenting code. Now, the last step here when it comes to working with the project sort of at a deep level would be to maintain. Now, I understand, probably most of you have product teams or UX and UI designers that will ultimately determine the direction of the products you're building. But let's say that you didn't have them. Tabnine can be a really, really, really good source of suggestions, right? You're going to want to continuously improve your applications, and Tabnine can help you do that. So what we're going to do here, and let's just make sure comprehensive, perfect. Suggest, oh geez, 5 ways. Oh, what do we have here? Yeah, improve the code's performance and security. Let's throw in 1 to improve the UX UI as well. Perfect. So what we're going to do here is you'll see Tabnine is suggesting a handful, 5 to be specific, ways to improve my performance and security of this application. And of course, just one suggestion to improve UI and UX. And it's going to provide all the code suggestions as well. Now, what you can do is not actually generate Jira tickets within your instance of Jira, but you can get pretty close. And I think you'll make, you'll thank yourself later for this, right? You can say, now create Jira tickets for each of these identified, oh geez, identified, yeah, okay, that's identified tasks. Include details, expected completion. We'll do details and acceptance criteria and estimated time. Perfect. Now what Tabnine is going to do is create sort of mock Jira tickets, right? Giving you a description, the details, and the acceptance criteria and estimated time and priorities, as well as, geez, offer some labels to give you some more clarity on what you're doing here. It's performance upgrade, and we're working with a Next.js React app. This one is security and authentication. What else do we have here? Performance in UX. And it will tell you based on sort of how much weight it carries, how effective or how the benefit that this could provide. It's also going to say, hey, this is a high priority. But it's also going to recognize how much longer this could possibly take, right? And I think these are overestimations, right? Because we've seen how fast Tabnine can build. I bet you I could do this in a fraction of 6 hours, probably a matter of minutes, which is something we could explore in a later call. So let's talk now about the code review agent. That's sort of the last piece of this SDLC, and then we'll circle back for some best practices that we talked about earlier. So let's go in here. In app. Okay. So we're going to start with the rules interface. If you've been following these office hours sessions for a while, you'll see that this has changed. It's no longer within its sort of a separate URL. This is going to be now within the admin panel. And this is where you're able to see all of the rules predefined by Tabnine, as well as all the rules that will align with your unique standards as an organization. This is where they're all going to be stored. And Tabnine Enterprise currently comes with a set of rules that we've gathered, evaluated, and implemented based on software development best practices from leading voices in our space. So within this rules interface, you can visualize, fine-tune the rule set. You can also see good and bad examples, as well as customize those for each of these rules, determine severity, the language, as well as then, see if it's on and determine who this rule applies to, right? If it's organizational or if it's user-based, right? Now, on the flip side, what happens when you are an engineering manager and you have this enabled and someone on your team has just submitted a PR? What does that look like? Well, let's go over here. And this is a sample PR using the code review agent. What it's going to do is it will evaluate your code or review your code in the PR against your rules and flag any deviations, offer suggestions to fix the code as well. So you're going to see here, this is the code in question. This is the file in question. And here's the rule that was violated, right? And then this is the suggested revision. And you can also make comments about this specific suggestion and have a conversation with your engineering manager or your reviewer. But it's really, really powerful, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not, this is light years above the linters that we all have grown to know and love. It's much, much more precise, much, much more advanced. So do not get it confused with your grandfather's linter. This is not that. This is something that's very advanced, very innovative, and really helping that sort of, I want to say bottleneck, right? But as I may have talked about earlier, it's an interesting piece now where AI code generations, table stakes, right? Everyone's doing it, and people are, especially with Tabnine, you're putting so much code out there, good code. Now you have these bottlenecks of code review of geez, I have so much stuff in there. We're moving so fast, but now I'm struggling to code review and keep up with that. This is where this is going to come in, right? It's really going to take that to your SDLC to the next level. So at the bottom of this PR, oh geez, this is a great one. Just want to call out here. A lot of, I feel like, junior developers might do this, but it is a big no-no, right? Don't hard code sensitive information in your code, such as API keys and passwords. Something that you definitely do not want getting out into a production environment. But using the code review agent, you can stop it here with the PR and catch it before it goes there. At the bottom of all of your PRs, though, when you have the code review agent enabled, you're going to see a summary report, right? And this will say, okay, the number of critical issues, number of errors, warnings, and then possible suggestions. So an awesome, really high level overview to give you clarity or give you information on what's going on within the individual PR. And some of them might be a lot longer than others, right? 7 issues, not small, not large. When you have quite a lengthy one, this is going to really come in handy. So let's go back sort of about, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this code review agent, actually. So the code review agent understands your entire code base, right? Your team's patterns and your organization's unique standards. It can identify code if the code doesn't align with how your team specifically writes software, even if that code is technically correct, which I think is really sharp. On the other hand, linting only checks against universal rules and patterns with no understanding of your team's specific approaches or preferences. Right. And another piece that's, a linter versus this code review agent, why they're different is the customization depth, right? The code review agent can be coached through plain language instructions about your team's preferences and standards. You can explain complex architectural principles or business logic rules that you want it to enforce. With linting, it's primarily offers configuration through technical rules and regex patterns, right? With limited ability to understand higher level concepts. And then, when you have learning and adaptation, right? The code review agent gets smarter about your code base over time through its connection to your repositories and documentation. And it will recognize patterns specific to your projects, right? Linting rules remain static unless manually updated. And we all know this space is moving fast, right? Not just with tech, right? But governance, compliance, and everything in between, right? So saying that you're going to have one set of rules to rule them all, heck, those rules might not even last a quarter, right? So it's really important to have something that's living, breathing, that's not just your standard linter, right? And then we talk about feedback quality, right? The code review agent provides this detailed explanation of issues, right? Suggests improvements, and it can even generate code fixes while maintaining consistency with your existing patterns. Linting usually offers brief, predefined error messages and basic fix suggestions. Sort of like a buddy who's saying, it's wrong, but not telling you why. And inherently might be more frustrating than it is helpful, right? And then you look at scope of analysis, right? The code review agent can evaluate architectural decisions, implementation approaches, correctness, security implications, performance considerations, all within the context of a specific application. Linting primarily focuses on code level issues like formatting, potential bugs, and basic best practices. So think of it this way. A linting tool is like a spell check, while Tabnine's code review agent is more like having a senior developer who knows your code base inside and out and reviewing your code. So talked about that. Let me go back over here to our IDE and let's talk about the settings really quickly. And then we'll open it up into some questions because I'm sure there's probably a handful. Chat response length. We understand that different scenarios call for different levels of detail, right? And our new response length customization feature lets users fine-tune how Tabnine communicates based on their specific needs and preferences, right? So concise mode is going to be great for experienced developers who just need a quick to-the-point answers, right? They'll receive focused responses that cut straight to the solution. So let's just say, explain this entire fraud detection dashboard application. Perfect. Okay. So you're going to see here, this is a really detailed, comprehensive overview of the key components and functionality of this entire dashboard. Now, that was the concise. It's still good, right? It's going to give me a nice full overview, but watch what happens when we put on comprehensive, right? And we go in here and we say new chat, and just make sure we're here. Perfect. We say explain this entire fraud detection dashboard application again. Now, this comprehensive mode is going to transform Tabnine into a detailed tech advisor, pretty much, right? It'll provide in-depth explanations, sometimes alternative approaches, and relevant examples. And it's particularly valuable, in my opinion, for developers who are new to a team or project or need more assistance, or for documenting important technical decisions. Each response really becomes a mini learning opportunity, with best practices and possibly potential pitfalls to consider, right? And you'll see it's exponentially longer and more comprehensive than the concise version. So let's start a new conversation. Let's move back over here. So underneath that, you're going to find custom chat behaviors. This is a whole can of worms. There's a lot of really, really cool things you can do here within this setting, right? This is, in my opinion, going to fundamentally change how developers will interact with Tabnine AI chat. And that's a powerful statement, and I'm going to show you why, right? Think of this as having a configurable AI partner that automatically adjusts its expertise and communication style to match your team's needs, right? So some common use cases we've seen so far: language response customization, right? For non-English characters like Hindi, as well as Spanish, Chinese. Others of the source, right? So let's say respond in Hindi, and I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to say explain this entire fraud detection dashboard. And this is, in my opinion, incredibly powerful for teams that are global, right? I think it's, rare that you find a team that's all in-house, all within, the same country, all speaking the same language, right? This allows Tabnine to really have a global presence in the sense that anyone can use it regardless of the language that you're speaking. And it doesn't just start or stop with language, right? You can ask Tabnine to focus on security patterns, right? Focus on performance or architectural trade-offs, API design. The only limit with this feature is your own creativity. And I think that's powerful because it's rare. And what you can achieve with it is vast. This is really just scratching the surface, and to hopefully get your wheels turning up here, to think how you can implement this on your side, right? So below that, we're going to see, let me just remove this so we can read what's going on. We're going to find custom commands. Again, an incredibly powerful feature and section of Tabnine. Another one of those areas that truly limited based on your creativity and imagination, which again, very unusual in I think the space we live today. And let's talk about what you can do here, right? So there's ones that, let's say that I've already created, like Vol Smasher 2. It's going to be based on the OWASP top 10, analyze the selected code for any vulnerabilities, if there are any, say what they are, what they are, and provide documentation around the vulnerability. And if there aren't, just tell me so, right? And you also see that we can share this with team members, right? So I'm finding a lot of use out of this. I want other team members to be able to experience this. I can click this button. It'll say save and share. And what you'll see here now is Tabnine is going to create this Tabnine commands file, where now it's going to have Vol Smasher 2 at the bottom. And when I push this project, any of my other coworkers or teammates, when they pull it back down, they're going to have this custom command now loaded within their IDE when they use this project. It's an awesome way to sort of not enforce, but have that same level of functionality across the entire organization or across entire teams, right? You're not going to have to rebuild that same custom command that your coworker next to you, Amaya, is using and having great success with. You can just say, hey, Amaya, when you push this project next, can you include that custom command? I want to use it. And he can do that, and it'll then get pulled down into your project. When we talk about specifics of custom commands, right? So security, one of them. Another one that I like to use is Refactor Wizard, right? It'll refactor my code and offer suggestions to simplify it, right? So let's just show one of these in action. We're going to go here to the dashboard.txs and whoops, let's go to a new file and let's hit Von Smasher 2. Sweet. No immediate severe vulnerabilities present. However, there are a few areas that could potentially lead to security issues if not handled properly. Awesome. Okay. And then I can take it a step further and I can say, how can I implement these suggestions? And what you'll see again is it's going to provide a bunch of suggestions based on the improvements it suggested above. And as we've seen here during this demo, it's as simple as just clicking apply and moving on to the next one. But worth calling out, Tabnine will always show you a selected diff. It's not just going to, if there is code that's being changed or tweaked or replaced, not just blindly adding in new code, it's going to show you that selected diff. And it'll say, hey, this is what's being taken out. This is what we're bringing in, right? It's about having that human in the loop. Yeah, so let's see here. Okay. So we've gotten that suggestion. Let me show you one more here and then we'll move on. So if we go back into custom commands, there's a really cool one. So create docs from template. Something you can do within custom commands is you can do app mentions, right? You can also, it's a tip here is to make them sequenced, right? So step one, reference the next project guidelines markdown file for proper documentation. Now step two, create docs from the selected code based on the format in that file. Excuse me. So we can go back in here and let's choose, now we'll choose this area. Create docs from template. Perfect. This is doing exactly what I want it to, right? You can see if I go back in here, next project guidelines. This has all of my area. It's my area where I specify exactly how I want my documentation to be, right? So within each type or area of the file, this is how I want my documentation to be styled, right? Provide examples as well within the docs. And you'll see it's doing just that. right? It's reading that documentation, not just generating a block at the top. It's generating everything that I've asked for, that I've outlined within that document, right? And then it's, again, as simple as saying apply, accepting that change, and then we're good to go. So believe that is about it here. We've covered each of the sort of areas of tab 9, right? Covered each step of the SDLC, starting with plan, then create, then fix, then test, then maintain. We've talked about code review. We've gone over the personalization capabilities. And we've even covered a little bit of some best practices within, how to query, right? But happy to answer any questions and open up the floor for QA now. It looks like Amaya's answered. Can you make the font on the window a little bit bigger? Sorry about that. Kumar, did not realize that you guys were having trouble seeing this. Not sure if I can actually make it bigger within this IDE here. Let's see here. Oh, all right. A little bit bigger. Feel like my mother reading. Anywho, any more questions here? I know we covered a lot, and we covered a lot very quickly. So we'll pause here for a second. So while we do wait for some other questions to roll in, I just want to talk about some best practices here within when it comes to prompting within tab 9, right? So you know how they say you get garbage in, garbage out? Well, with any AI or LLM, it's more like vague in and chaos out, right? So just a few battle-tested tips here to close off the session to help you avoid those "what the heck was I thinking" moments when you're working with an AI code assistant. Sort of think of these as the developers or the developer's guide to speaking AI, right? Because sometimes we feel like it feels like we need a little bit of a translator, right? So when it comes to prompting, be very, very clear with your language. It's one of the most important aspects to working with tab 9 AI chat, or just any AI code assistance chat, or any LLM. You have to be very, very clear with your language, as it helps generate more specific responses, right? Saying write a function to encrypt a password versus write a function to encrypt a password using bytecrypt and validate that encryption, exponentially much more effective in generating a better response that's going to generate that outcome that you're looking for. It's ultimately just the outcome that's going to be more correct. Another tip here: start new conversations for each new task, right? Don't be that person who tries to explain 5 different bugs in one conversation. We all know how well that works up in a stand-up meeting, right? Start a new conversation when you're working on a new task or a problem domain. AI is very similar to your brain, right? It can only handle so much. So, new chat, how can I improve the security of my password generator or fraud detection dashboard? New chat, is the generated suggestions, for my query and implementation, you just continuously, if you have excuse me, how can you improve the security of your password generator? One question. Another one would be, testing. That's a new conversation. Documentation, new conversation, right? And then the last piece here is when using AI, using Tabnine, context is king, right? It's king, it's queen, it's the entire royal family. Without context, you can't make use of Tabnine's retrieval augmented generation, right? So you get a raw LLM response. Remember that an LLM alone is like a team member, a new team member who's brilliant, right? But they haven't learned your code base yet. The more context that you give the LLM, the less likely it is to suggest something that'll make your senior engineers spit out their coffee in horror, right? So, and then the last piece would be just to break down your prompts into steps, right? Use, first, 1 period, do this, 2, do this, 3, do this. And then you can even go back into Tabnine and say, run everything sequentially, right? That's a key message there. Run it sequentially, which will allow Tabnine or help Tabnine to do your queries or your prompts or your custom commands in the specific order that you want them to. So review a markdown sheet, create a new test file, right? Create test file or testing cases based on what you've outlined in that markdown sheet for this selected code. We've done it. We've seen customers do it, and it is changing the game in how fast they can generate production level code or do production ready tasks, right? Generate real accurate documentation, generate real tests. So I think the last little bit I'll cover here is just file management, right? You know how your browser slows down when you have 100 tabs open. Same principle here with Tab9. Keep relevant files open, close the ones you don't need. AI's context window is like your brain after a long debugging session. It can only handle so much at once, right? One golden rule, though, just to cap off this entire section, is if you remember anything from here, it's to be specific, be clear, and do not be afraid to iterate, right? Continue to ask questions, continue to feed it prompts, continue to iterate on suggestions. That's how you're going to end up getting the best responses. So, what was that last point again, Kumar? Let me see here. 33. Yeah. So the last point, I believe would be to break it down into steps, right? So when you're in the custom behaviors or you're in the custom commands or you're typing in a prompt, right? To say 1, review the selected code for, potential security vulnerabilities. Whoops, hit that too quick. To, generate, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. 3, to do things basically in sequential order, having this specificity in the prompt will allow Tab9 to soar to much greater heights, right? It's the ability to do much more complex queries or actions within, minimal prompting, I guess. Much more complex actions, minimal prompting can be achieved using sequential ordering or specification within your prompting. So with this logic of being specific, how does Tab9 use number of coding guidelines for code reviews? Does it for each rows, it runs through all of the lines? So little bit difficult understanding the question, Pratam, but I'll do my best to answer it here. Tabnine will, and the topic of the code review agent, it's just going to, when I push a PR, it's going to evaluate every rule that's currently active in my rule set against what I'm pushing in that PR. And if there is any match, right, whether it's semantically or like behaviorally, it's going to recognize that, right, and it will call that out within the PR. But it is going to run through all of the rule sets within that request. Yep, Kimura, that's correct. Sequential, bite-sized, self-contained instructions honoring specificity. That is the goal here, right? Chunk it up, make it specific, make it clear, put it into steps. You will be shocked the amount of things that you can do when you do that. So it's a question that I want to pose to everyone here is, what are you doing today on a day-to-day basis that you wish you could automate, right? What's something that you're prompt engineering on a daily basis that takes a lot of time? Go back into Tabnine, whether it's creating a custom command that's sequential, right? Or it's creating, specific prompts here. Test it out. Try figuring out, okay, you can use, for example, create documentation guidelines. Reference those documentation guidelines when you're creating test files on how to test something properly for a new component that you've recently made, right? Instead of having to go through and do that whole testing process, you can have a custom command that's going to generate that whole test file for you based on the component that you've selected, based on previous tests that you've already made, right? So really, when you start doing this stuff, it can really speed up the development process. This style of articulation also increases gradual intelligence and gives great feedback. Yeah, exactly right, Kumar. So any other questions here? Anything else that anyone wants to see? Heck, we could try and build some custom commands here or try and test out some functionality if anyone has anything they're looking for. If not, we can end it here. So I will give everyone about another minute here. But again, as always, this is not the last time you're going to see our faces. We are here every Wednesday. So this week was 7 a.m. PT. Pacific time. We are going to be back next week at 10:30 Pacific time, covering relatively the same style of talk, right? We're going to do 2-week increments of shows, right? So this show is going to be going on for another week here, and then we're going to have a slight change in our content after next week. And that'll just continue on every 2-week cadence. Yep, got it. So basically all rules matching the nearest context will be ran for code review. Thank you. Yep. And as always, thank you to everyone who has asked questions, engaged with us in the chat, tuned in. Appreciate you spending an hour and 40 minutes of your time with us this morning. It is always a pleasure getting a chance to jump on and talk to everyone and demo such a cool project. So yeah, if there's no other questions, we can end things here. Again, always a pleasure. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.